When people in our life are hurting, sometimes it's hard to know the right thing to say. Let's talk about that today. Hey everybody, welcome to the 7 at 7. I'm glad that you're here. This week we're talking about issues that surround suffering and pain and grief and maybe how we come alongside those who are grieving. On Sunday, one of the illustrations we visited about was Job and his somewhat knucklehead friends. You remember these three guys? We had Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. Like, these are the three guys. Their names are a little crazy on top of the things they had to say. The gist of what they kept coming back at him with over and over and over again is, Job, you know what? All these things have happened because you've done the wrong thing, or you've done something sinful, or your kids did something sinful. It always came back to the fact that this was a very personal mistake you've made or they have made that has caused this pain to come into your life. But as we talked about Sunday, often the pain that we experience, the bad things that come into our life are not like directly connected to mistakes that we have made. Sometimes it's just we live in a fallen world and bad things happen, and sometimes they happen to people who didn't have anything to do with the thing that happened. Just because somebody drops a Coke bottle, as we talked about on Sunday, and somebody else steps on it, doesn't mean it's the person who stepped on its fault. And so this is the notion that not all bad things that happen are directly connected to some action that we've done as individuals. And this is that karma idea that comes out of the Eastern sort of mystic religions that we as Christians just blatantly reject, in part because of Job. It was clear that the bad things that happened to Job were not connected to what Job had done in particular. So this kind of leads us into a conversation about the kinds of things we say to people when they're hurting or they're having a bad day or they're grieving. And sometimes people try to say the right thing. And I'm sure that all of Job's friends were trying to be helpful, but boy, they weren't. Now, sometimes we can do the same kind of things. And so I've been thinking about some things people say that sometimes when they say it, when people are grieving, it's just not the right way to go. For instance, sometimes we say things like, hey, I know how you feel. Well, I mean, you may have been through the exact thing that they're going through and you're trying to demonstrate that you're empathizing, but really everybody experiences things different. And sometimes if we say, hey, I know how you feel, it reduces what they feel. It kind of says, hey, you know what, I've been through this. It's no big deal. You go through it. You'll be fine too. And somehow reduces their pain and the sorrow that they're going through. So maybe sometimes that's not exactly the right thing to say. Maybe the thing is, hey, you know what, this is what happened in my life and it was a really tough time. And I know you've got all kinds of other things going on with you. All of us experience grief different. I just want you to know I'm here for you. And if I can be helpful, I want to be. Because I've been through it. I know how bad it hurt and how much good it was for me to have a friend. I want to be a friend to you. Another thing that we sometimes hear people say, or some people say, is they say things like, well, they're in a better place. Well, of course, if they're a Christian, we know that this is true. But for somebody that's grieving, sometimes that causes them to feel like, well, you know, maybe I shouldn't be grieving because, you know, they're in a better place. And of course, it is comforting to know that they're not here anymore and they're in a place, but it doesn't remove the fact that I'm still really hurting. And again, sometimes we're just trying to make people feel better when maybe the right thing to do is say, it's okay that you're really hurting. You know, this is one of those things you got to kind of feel what the Holy Spirit tells you in these matters. But sometimes people can kind of be taken off guard by the idea that it's just simplified to, hey, they're in a better place. Even though both these first things are true, you may know how they feel, and they may indeed be true that the person they love is in a better place. It's a little bit about the timing on those kind of things and the spirit in which they're said, but both of these things sometimes can hurt people. The third is sometimes people say this, well, at least they lived a long life. And you know what? Again, you're trying to be comforting. You're trying to say the thing, just like Job's friends were trying to be helpful. But this also minimizes their pain. Even if they did live 85 or 95 years, the person you're talking to is really hurting. And the fact that they lived a long life doesn't change the fact that they still really do miss them in the here and the now. Again, sometimes truthful things still come across harsh. When Julie and I lost our daughter, we had a woman that came to us at the funeral and said, hey, at least you're young. You can have another kid. Well, this was true. It was possible, but it sure did seem to reduce the pain that we were feeling about our daughter who we had lost, who we'd never be able to hold, even if we'd had 15 more kids. And so again, somebody trying to be helpful, you're saying the right thing, but maybe the timing isn't exactly right. The fifth idea is that, hey, you need to be strong. Well, of course, again, this is true. It's great if they have strength and they depend on God to help them get through all this. But that seems to indicate that there's not really room for them to grieve, or it's not right for them to cry or be upset. And we already got enough of that in the world. It's possible to grieve and be strong. And maybe that's not the kind of advice that we need to give. Again, you know what? Sometimes it is because we do wrong things that bad things happen to us. And to some degree, Job's friends were right. At least some of the times they might have been right. But the timing and the way they said it demonstrates itself to be all wrong in the book of Job. And sometimes when we're dealing with people who are grieving, we have to be careful that what we're saying doesn't come across as insensitive or hurtful, even if it is some way truthful. The idea that we speak the truth in love says that even when we know what's true to be the right thing to say, there's a right time to say those things. And part of being with people in the middle of grief is not only saying the right thing, but making sure that your timing is correct. I would never discourage you from being near those who are grieving, but just to be sensitive and careful about the things that you say, and make sure that if you're speaking the truth, you're speaking the truth at the right time. Well, I'm grateful for our church and all the compassion that is shown by so many people this week. As you go about loving on people that are hurting, may God give you just the right words at the right time. And I might encourage you above all things to really pray that God will do that very thing before you sit down with somebody who's hurting, before God puts you in a place with somebody who's grieving. Love you guys. Have a great day. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow.